Welcome to the podcast, the Human Experience Podcast, where we explore the depths of spirituality and our own personal journeys and experiences. I'm Dr. Carlos Garcia.
And I'm Supna Doshi. In this space, we'll reflect on the wisdom of some of the most profound spiritual teachers, from Eckhart Tolle to Ram Dass, Wayne Dyer, Michael Singer. Together, we'll dive into their teachings and share our own insights that have guided us on our own paths of self-discovery.
Each episode will feature inspiring clips from these masters, weaving them into our own reflections and conversations on how spirituality has enriched our daily lives, deepened our understanding of ourselves, and led us to a more meaningful experience.
So, take a deep breath, open your heart, and join us on this journey of exploration. Welcome to the podcast, the Human Experience Podcast.
I had this experience last night, which was extraordinarily, I handled it differently than I would have before because of the therapist that I've been seeing, Allie. As I started again, struggling with, it's another transitional period in my life with the kids growing up, and it was a lot of things. I was talking to a cousin at a wedding we went to this weekend, and she was recently married. She's 35. And I asked her, I said, are you and your husband considering having children? Are you thinking that that's not a route for you? And she just talked about like how many different forms of that she's seen in her community, adoption and teachers. And there's just so many forms of parenting, so many ways to parent. And I was sharing with her that this was a hard time because for 12 years, my identity, and I chose it, my identity has been tied to my children. Like my entire purpose in life, everything that I do revolves around them. And it was a conscious choice that I ended up making, which I'm super happy that I did. And I started seeing Allie because now the kids are getting older, they need you less. And it's like as a mother or as a woman, or I don't know if there is a label, but now you have to identify differently. And so I find myself looking for things to take care of. Now I have plants and I have my dog. And so I started seeing Allie because I felt like there was a lot of emotion trapped inside that I wasn't releasing because I was logically talking myself through it, but not feeling my way through it. And so I've only had a few sessions with her, but she's been great at, I guess, asking the exact right questions to get me to bawl like a baby. Although it hasn't felt cathartic yet, clearly it's all in there and needs to come out. I want to say unfortunately, but I don't think it's unfortunate. Last night I was home with the triplets and they didn't want to go take a shower. And one of their reactions to me saying, well, you have to go take a shower was, I wish Papa was here and not you. And logically, that was totally fine. Like, he's 12. Clearly, that's something 12-year-olds say. I swear, Carlos, I cried for like 30 minutes.
Oh.
I didn't go and hide in the bathroom. I didn't go and hide in a bedroom. I sat there on the sofa and I just cried and I let them watch me cry. And it was probably the hardest thing that I've done because I didn't want him to feel like he made me feel that way. And I tried to explain afterwards. They were asking, like, were you crying because of what he said? And I said, something he said triggered something that was already inside of
Beautiful.
So it was not something that he did. However, when he said that, it had this effect on me, and that's what caused. But I didn't want to not let it out. That was hard. But I don't think I would have been able to do it had I not had the coaching or the teaching or the permission from my therapist to do that.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious. I mean, we can go a couple of different ways here because I think there's something to be said about the ways we have relationships with our children, right? And this idea that they trigger us or what they trigger in us. I often am reminding parents, right, that if you're getting into some kind of ego battle with your child. Like that's more about you and less about them, right? They're kind of just being them. But I want to back up even from that. And maybe this is just an assumption on my part or a generalization, but it seems like more often than not, parents don't really take the time to reflect on how deeply entrenched they get into their parent role. And often we'll only experience that, right, when children go off to college or leave the house and, right, that empty nest syndrome. But it sounds like you have consciously chosen to start looking at part of your identity. Is that just something that naturally came up for you? Like, where did that come from?
For me, I think it was early on I had to make a choice because 3 is different than 1. Like 3 babies, I could not go back to work. Before, my identity was tied to my role as an HR director, right? And in that capacity, I served a lot of other people and took care of a lot of other people. But having 3 children, there was no way in my mind that I could be a good mother and do that job well. And so for me, I made a choice that if I do anything right in this lifetime, it will be to be a good mom. And then I had to make choices that supported that the whole way through, which, is hard. It's not easy, but it was definitely a conscious choice.
You sort of said to your kids, something in me got triggered, right? Like even that acknowledgement of like taking ownership of the ways in which our stuff will come up. I'm curious, like, what were you able to identify or have you figured out? Like, what was the thing in you that felt triggered? I mean, I can make an assumption, but
I don't know that I can 100% pinpoint it. I think that just this time in my life is such a large transition. They're not leaving the house, they're not going off to college, but we homeschooled. Like I was with my children 24/7. Like I was the primary caregiver. I did everything, fed them and bathed them and everything, emotionally supported them. And their dad is amazing. And he had a full-time job. So we have our roles. And I think now, because I am needed a little less because now they're in school, I question if I am the right person to lead them through the next phase of their life. And that's really hard. And as attached as I am to that role, it's important for me to be able to detach, to look at what is best for them and who are the best people. We can't do anything alone. And when I say all of those things, I was with them for 12 years. I mean, there was a whole slew of other people who have influenced the children. I just had a primary leading role. But in this next phase, I wonder if I've given everything I have to offer and I have to be able to take a step back and allow other people to step in.
yeah. I got to be honest, my friend, I'm sitting over here in awe and like utter admiration for you. That just sounds like such challenging work to do on oneself, like in the service of them, right? I think oftentimes, or at least this has been sort of my experience of a lot of the people that I work with, but that it's just easy to sort of assume that, how we're showing up as a parent is whatever was taught to us, whatever we think, right? That there's not really a lot of work to do internally there. And yet, ever since having my son, there's been growth that I don't think I could have come across in any other way. Like moments of self reflection, moments of recognizing the emotions and feelings, the reactions that arise in me as a result of who he is or how he's being on any given day. And so I'm really sitting here in awe and just admiration at how deeply you're sort of self reflecting.
I'm curious for you because, like I said, if I didn't have Allie's office to give me the space to know that I have permission to do this work, that it is important, it would be different. And I know that you started on this journey because you had an amazing therapist that influenced you so much that you wanted to join that field. And I'm curious how, I guess, you balance those roles for yourself in your own journey.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably at the top of it all is a recognition, at least for me in my mind, that we are all souls who come here to do life or a series of works that is needed for our spiritual evolution. There's a way in which I can separate I am Jonah's father and Jonah is a soul who's come here to be fathered by me. And so obviously, yes, I have to take responsibility for my role in being that guide for him. But in some ways, a lot of it is out of my hands. Like what he's going to come here to experience in this lifetime, I may not have impact on. I think it starts there for me. On more of the psychological level, I spent many years in therapy to better understand myself in reflection of the relationship that I had with my own parents. So there was a lot of connections made about how they were or weren't, and how that may have contributed to the ways that I developed a relationship with others, a relationship with myself. So by the time I became a parent, I felt like I did have this strong foundation and an awareness of how my behavior, how I choose to relate to my son could impact him later on in life. I spent a lot of years doing some deep work and also sort of reflecting on who, even before I had a son or even before that was an idea in my mind, like who I would want to be as a father. Then they come into the world and then they're there. And then a lot of the things you thought you were going to do or be, it shifts.
I love that the reflection of your relationship with your parents, that work can influence your relationship with your children moving forward. I never did that. I never even realized that was a thing
Mm,
before I had kids. And I think that's true for a lot of people.
yeah.
I think we just don't dig into our childhood and our experiences, and that we logically process it, say, oh, well, I was the youngest child, or I was the middle child, or I was the oldest child, or I was the only child. And that's just how it is. And my parents did the best they could. So I think that's so valuable to do prior to becoming a parent.
I'll be honest. I mean, it's absolutely absurd to me to get a driver's license. You get a booklet. You have to study the booklet. You have to go and take a test, right? Like for many of the things we do in life, there are parameters which must be met. And yet for being a parent, not so much.
It is really crazy.
Yeah. But I think maybe part of the issue there, it's the way that we conceptualize the whole therapy process. I think if more of us saw therapy as an opportunity to better know thyself, to better recognize our patterns, especially those unconscious ones, especially those connections that were maybe subtle in nature or that we're just not aware of, instead of this thing that I'm struggling or I'm suffering or there's something wrong. And that's when I go to therapy, which is, I think, why I'm so invested in changing the narrative around what that space is meant for and can be used for.
And I think that's so critical, because I've been open within my community that when we decided to transition the kids from homeschool to going to school, we decided to get a family therapist. I decided to get a family therapist, and I explained to the children, it's too big a transition for me. I need help. And as my children, you get to come and support me in that help. And it's been a phenomenal tool for us as a family to work through things that have come up in the process. And it's interesting because they will come home and say to me, oh, well, do you know that this boy's in therapy? And I said, yeah. And they'll say, people think something's wrong with him. And I said, oh, well, you're in therapy. Is there something wrong with you? And I'm in therapy. Is there something wrong with me? No, it's a tool and we use it. And I'm so glad that he's getting another outlet, another tool, the help that he needs, the resources that he needs. And I find a lot of parents posting in like these parenting groups that I'm in, but they'll post anonymously asking for a therapist because there's some shame or guilt around it. And I just feel like everybody should have a therapist. There should be something wrong with somebody if they don't have a therapist.
Right. Yeah. I often share this story You may have heard me share it before. It sort of illustrates how our early programming can really lead to attitudes and beliefs that we develop later on in life about ourselves. Because I think most people tend to believe if they had a good enough childhood, and not good in air quotes here because, right, that's very subjective. But they think, oh, I had a good childhood, didn't experience any trauma, so I'm fine. And so usually when I hear something like that, I'll share this story. And it's the story of a child going out to eat with their parents. This child is like 6 or 7 years old, and they go out to eat every Friday. And on this particular Friday, the parents say, we're going to let you choose what you'd like to eat for dinner. Right. So the child gets all excited, right? Finally get to make some adult decisions. And they get to the restaurant, and the child looks at the menu and sees this big, delicious, cheesy pizza and says, I want the pizza. To which the mom responds, honey, are you sure? Why don't you get the burger? That's what you normally get. So the child stops and thinks about it for a moment. Yeah, mom is kind of right. But the child sticks to their decision. No, the pizza. And then, this sort of very loving mother wants to check in one more time. Honey, what if you don't like the pizza? The burger's the safe bet. So the child stops and thinks about it one more time, but sticks to their guns, right? Sticks to their decisions. No, the pizza. And right in that moment, the other parent chimes in, we're not getting the pizza. It's too big. You're not going to eat it all. It's going to be a waste of money. So the child says, fine, I'll get the burger. And the night goes on and life goes on, right? No big deal. And then my question to people is, in that moment, what do you think that child believes about their ability to make decisions? Maybe that they need to ask other people, or maybe my decisions are no good, maybe my choices are bad, some version of that. Now, one of the things that we know about most parents is that the way that they parent is pretty consistent over the lifetime of that child. So chances are this child probably heard a very similar message around academics, sports, extracurricular activities, the way they dress every time they went out to eat. So then I posed the question, do you imagine over time this child might develop a sort of second guessing of their thoughts, opinions, feelings? Do you imagine this child might develop a little bit of self doubt? How might that over time impact the kind of self esteem that they have? How might it impact the sort of risks that they take or don't take? And this is somebody that will come to me later in life who deals with maybe a lot of anxiety or pressure or stress around making decisions in their life, both professionally and personally. Maybe even to the point of having anxiety around making decisions or feel overwhelmed. But if you ask them, they'll be like, I don't know why I'm like this. I have no idea. Tell me about your childhood. I had a great childhood, very loving parents. Right. So to me, obviously, if we've experienced traumas and significant hard experiences as children with our parents or caretakers, I mean, that sends out a ripple, but sometimes it's just these subtle over time messages that unconsciously and subtly were kind of imposed on us, or we were conditioned by them. And so oftentimes, even those have a more detriment or more impact in the belief systems that we adopt about the world, about other people, about ourselves. And the truth is, my friend, that like when I share that story with like almost everybody I ever share that story with can resonate with some aspect of that. And it's like, if that resonates with you, then there is something in therapy you can go and figure out about yourself.
Absolutely. I was definitely in the boat of, well, I didn't have any major trauma. I must have had a great childhood. And I did have a great childhood. I have wonderful parents.
Yeah.
And yes, there's still lots of things to uncover about myself that I didn't realize. And its impact on our adult life is mind blowing when you are able to sit and find the threat. And at the same time, I would say, in a lot of ways, simply bringing that awareness to it allows you to shift it. For me, that's the power of therapy, is that having somebody just help you bring awareness to something and bring it to the forefront, and now it's in your consciousness, and now it can shift. And really, it just opens up. My experience has been that it just opens up a world of new experiences that I probably would have missed out on had I not done the work.
Wow. That's so powerful. You mentioned earlier about sort of feeling the permission to be able to do this work or to have these feelings or these reactions. What is that like?
Yeah, I think part of my own narrative is that I am the strong one. I am the glue. I am the leader. I am the one that shows up for everyone else. And in many ways, there's no room for weakness or sadness or not having the energy to get out of bed in the morning. And for me, all of those are false thoughts. None of it's true. And logically, I can make sense of it. And still, I need permission to cry. And I need somebody to give me permission and the space to not get out of bed, and the permission and the space to have a bad day, to have a slow day, to not do the dishes, to not know what's for dinner, to not show up for others. I need that permission to be compassionate with myself. And for me, it obviously cannot come from my children. It cannot come from my mother or my father. It can't come from a significant other. I need somebody completely independent to tell me that that's okay, Sapna. Because if one of those people tell me, it's like, oh, well, you just think I'm not strong enough to do this. And I've had several amazing therapists over the course of the last decade. And that's what I love about, I guess, this process and this journey. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, well, I tried therapy once and it just wasn't for me. And my response is always, well, you didn't have the right therapist for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got to keep going. It's almost like a job. You have to keep interviewing people and keep going to different therapists until you find the one that clicks with you. And that also is not like a lifetime relationship. Usually it's a period relationship. You work together, you work through some things, you usually take a break, and then you're ready to go back and you find somebody else. And so, I mean, I've had at least 5 different amazing therapists, and they've all taught me different tools and all helped me through different things and helped bring awareness in different ways. But that is the power of therapy for me. And I feel in a lot of ways that it is because of our shift in community.
Mm.
I feel personally that because in our past generation, our families and our communities were so tight knit that when you needed help, you went to somebody in your family, you went to an elder. Elders recognized when younger people were struggling and they would ask questions to try and help them. That was our role as a community and as a family, was to help each other. And I feel like now that's not there anymore. And so we have to have another outlet, which therapy serves wonderfully.
Yeah, we've taken our elders and put them in homes to not be related with and to sort of protect whatever it is we think we're protecting.
Well, so we don't dig into our stuff,
Right.
I think, because they trigger a lot of our stuff too. But that's like, and we've spoken about it before, like that's the purpose of these relationships, is to identify where our thorns are, as Singer says, so that we can then bring awareness to that and let it go.
Yeah.
But when we run away from those relationships or put them in boxes or things like that, we're left missing a lot of pieces.
I know that for me, one of the biggest shifts that has been so helpful is that recognition that if something somebody's doing is triggering me, that it's not a them issue, it's a me issue. Instead of trying to see how I need to change that person or ask them to be different, how I can go inward and see what is it in me that's getting so triggered. It's relieved a lot of the pressure of how I feel I need to manage relationships, and just such a beautiful teaching tool. I mean, a part of that comes from I've done enough work on myself at this point to recognize and even have compassion for the ways that I am wired, even the parts of me that I don't want wired that way, and the parts of me that I've tried so hard to change has given me a deep respect for how other people are wired and how I talk about this idea of like, I can be very conscious of things in myself that I want to change. I'm motivated to want to change them. I have the inspiration to want to change that aspect of me. And still, it's so hard to change. So, what does that say for people who maybe haven't developed the insight, the awareness, the whatever, and that because of that, they're sort of rooted in these patterns of being good or bad? So, yeah, it just allows me to have a much deeper compassion and empathy for the different ways that people show up in the world.
And acceptance.
Acceptance. Yeah.
For people to just be who they are, where they are in their journeys.
Which, at least for me, then allows me to have more acceptance for where I am.
Absolutely.
It's a two-way street.
Absolutely. My running coach sent me this amazing podcast on relationships. And in it, they talk about really what you were saying about when something is triggered in you, it's not about them, it's about you. And in this podcast, talk about saying things that are over the net, which means I'll have to listen to it again. But for me, it was like the analogy that you're playing tennis with somebody and you're lobbing the ball. And that if you're saying something that's over the net, that's in their side, then it's really not about them. It's about you. You just talk about you and let them worry about them. And so I loved that analogy when working with relationships.
There are actually in interaction 3 realities. One reality is my intention, my motivation. So right now I intend to be clear. I intend to be helpful. Second reality is my behavior. What do I do? What I say, my words, my tone. And the third is the impact on you. I don't know that third. And not only that, you don't know my first. Each of us have 2 of the 3 realities. To build a relationship, I often need to raise the issues that get in the way. It's called giving feedback. And in giving feedback, we do it in a way that tends not to be functional. We don't stick with our reality, our expertise. So the net concept is, think of tennis. And there's a tennis net between the first and the second reality, between my intentions and my behavior. You can't play tennis. You can't play in the other person's back court. You got to stay in your court. But most feedback is over the net. So if I do something that bothers you and you say, well, David, you just want to dominate. Well, hell, you don't know what I want. You're over the net. Or David, you just want to show how smart you are. Or David, you're just this. And so we say, stick with your reality. So I remember a time when a person frowned and said, I'm bothered. And I said, well, Donald, what's the matter? And he said, you interrupted me. Now, if he would have, and I said, yes. And he said, that's inconsiderate. Now, it would have been more accurate if he would have said, I feel put down. I feel not being honored or considered. That would have been really his reality. But he was telling me the impact of my behavior. And by doing that, I can then say, wow, wasn't my intention, but I guess I'm doing something that I don't want to do. So if we could stick with, how does your behavior affect me? What does it make me feel like? How is it likely to impact my results and my way of interacting with you? We can say an awful lot more. But when we go over the net and make imputations of the other's motives and intentions, the other person feels defensive, resistant, and it hurts the relationship. So you're right, it's a key concept. And it's so hard for people not to make attributions of the other person's motives and intentions. And it's so damaging and so dangerous.
Brilliant.
Can you share your journey to becoming a therapist?
Yeah.
And kind of how that manifested for you?
Yeah, it was mostly a product of having witnessed the just complete and utter transformation of my life as a result of therapy. The way it helped me understand myself, the way it helped me navigate how I processed and understood emotions, how I processed and understood the way my mind worked. It was such a just deep transformational shift from who I was to who I was becoming that I just sort of vowed, like, this is what I want to do. If I can just help one other person in the world shift the way my therapists have helped me, like, this is what I'm meant to do. At this point, I was probably 5.5, 6 years into my work as a firefighter. I say to people, like, I loved that career and it was very rewarding, but it never felt like home. It didn't feel like that's what I was meant to do. But when I got to grad school and in my second year, started seeing your first kind of clients as an intern and as a student, it immediately felt like home.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like, oh, this is what I was meant to do. And it just felt so easy because I knew how to be with people. That's just something I've always kind of done ever since I was a child, just to be relatable to others and share in a way that makes people feel comfortable. But I had spent so many years in that other seat as a patient, as a client, and could remember, like, what were the things that my therapist gave me that were helpful in my navigating of the therapeutic process. But yeah, so I was in the fire department. It was obviously a big sort of change. I came from a family that if you had a career, you stayed because that was safe and it was a paycheck and benefits. And so it took me a year to really contemplate this. I was already 32 at the time. And the idea of leaving a steady job to go be a student for 6 years wasn't super appealing, but the calling inside my heart was so strong that it just made it easy ultimately to make that decision. I hadn't completed my undergrad yet, so I did that online while I was at the fire department. So I got my undergrad degree in psychology. And then I thought I was going to have to do a master's before getting my doctorate, but I found this program that had what's called an en route master's. So it was a 5-year program. You could apply to it with a bachelor's degree. And then during the first 2 years, you get your master's. And then the final 3 years is for your doctorate degree. I mean, I loved grad school, again, because it just felt like home. Not so much on the classroom side of it. I didn't love all the bookwork and studying. But when it came to the clinical work, it just felt effortless. And I also was blessed by having some brilliant, brilliant supervisors along the way. Their approach, their ability to let me sort of find myself in the therapy room as a therapist was so powerful in who I sort of ultimately became as a psychologist. And so I feel super blessed for their role. They were like kind of half supervisor, half therapist, because they would help you see how even the stuff like that was in the room with your clients was triggering you. Like I remember one time, this was my intern year, so my final year of grad school. And I was seeing this young client who kept coming in every week and sort of complaining about the relationship that she was in, but wouldn't get out of it. And after 4 or 5 sessions of this, I feel myself start to get frustrated. And telling this client at one point, like it almost like in an upset tone, like, I don't know how to help you. Like I keep giving you all these tools and I keep sort of giving you advice on what to do. And I don't know what else to do here. Needless to say, that client never came back, right? It's considered a rupture in the therapeutic relationship. And I was like, of course. But as I'm sitting with my supervisor, she says to me, what was so frustrating about that? It's like, well, she just kept coming in and kind of complaining about the same thing and not making any change. And she's like, okay, but why was that upsetting to you? And I start to think and I'm like, well, yeah, I don't know. There was just like this martyrdom to her pain and suffering and grief, but like never wanting to do anything about it, just wanting to complain about it. And she's like, yeah, Carlos, I hear that, but why did that frustrate you? And then click, my mother. I was like, my mother. She reminds me of my mother in the way that she acts. Like my mother is that. She'll complain and woe is me. And you try to help her or support her. And she pushes away all of the help. And I was like, oh my goodness. Right. I was like, okay, so I got to go back to therapy and work on some of this stuff. But again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, the ways that sometimes just unconsciously, like the ways we've had relationships in the past mold how we react to people, right? So yeah, I had these wonderful, wonderful supervisors that helped really mold me as the therapist I am today.
I love that.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for people who haven't had luck in therapy or haven't tried it yet in finding a good fit?
Yeah, no, I mean, I echo everything you said earlier. Interview people, try until it feels like a good fit. I tell people to be patient. Oftentimes, the ways that we're trained in most schools is to be very problem solving in our approach. And that could be helpful, but sometimes the level of work that we need to do is a little bit deeper. So give yourself some time to arrive there, to develop the kind of trust you need with another human being to do that work. And then I also say, like, you should never feel judged. You should never feel right. Like, if it just doesn't feel right, that's not the right therapist for you. And can't even count how many different therapists I've had throughout my life for different reasons at different phases. So, yeah, just keep trying. There's some really, really amazing therapists out there doing just the most beautiful work. I know that too.
Love it.
I kind of always say to people, like, go for a few sessions. If you find absolutely nothing, hey, I mean, chances are you won't, but like, hey, great. At least you have now the peace of mind that you've at least given it a shot. But like I said earlier, for me, therapy is about holding up a mirror so that I can better see myself. Right. And that's almost always better done with some neutral person that's an outsider that can help you do that work.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Totally agree. Having that objective person who really doesn't have any skin in the game has been invaluable for me. We always talk about self-care. Like, oh, what are you doing for self-care? I'm getting a massage. It's like, no, I'm going to see my therapist every week. That's my self-care. Just like we go to the gym and we go for walks and we do all of these other amazing things. Yeah, for me, that's definitely a must.
And just, I want to thank you for sharing part of your own story with therapy and how that looks in your life and the way that you are modeling that for your children, right? Because I think that's how we make an impact later on down the road by destigmatizing and normalizing these conversations and this work. And so, again, I'm just really moved by the way you're doing that in your life.
Thank you, my friend. I think it is critical that our kids have the resources and the support they need and to know there's anything wrong with them. Just part of being human.
Right.
It is the human experience.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how a child that grows up with a psychologist father and marriage and family therapist mother, how early will he be in therapy being like, these two, it's like living with these two.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. That feels complete.
It does. Thank you, my friend.
There was a friend of mine. Her name was Portia Nelson. Portia passed away a few years back. She lived up in Seattle. And she was at a seminar, and they asked her and they asked everyone to write on a 5x7 sheet of paper or card the 5 chapters of their life. They only wanted to give them 5x7 cards because they didn't want them to get too wordy. And Portia Nelson sat down and wrote these words about the 5 chapters of her life. And I thought I would share them here with you. They're so beautiful. She said, Chapter 1 of my life. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. And it takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. It isn't my fault. And it still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my own fault. And I get out immediately. Chapter 4 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5 of my life. I walk down another street.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Podcast, the Human Experience Podcast. We're so grateful to have shared this time with you.
As we continue recording new episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like us to explore, and tell us about your own spiritual journey. We want to connect with you.
Give us a call at 800-791-3884 and leave us a voicemail. You might just be featured on a future episode of The Podcast.
Thank you for being part of our community. Until next time, keep walking your path with peace, love, and purpose.